The company I built tried to erase me. They forgot who designed their system. I had spent years building something that I thought would last forever. My company wasn't just a business to me. It was my legacy. I had poured my heart and soul into it, working long nights, sacrificing time with family and friends, all in pursuit of something greater. And for a long time, it seemed worth it. The company flourished. We disrupted industries, built technology that others envied, and secured deals that made us a powerhouse. My contributions weren't just valuable, they were essential. Or at least, that's what I believed. Then, the signs started to appear. At first, they were subtle. Emails that I was mysteriously left out of. Meetings that were scheduled at times I couldn't attend. Projects I had spearheaded suddenly being transferred to other executives without explanation. I told myself it was paranoia, that I was overthinking things. But then, bigger things happened. A key investor that had always worked closely with me suddenly stopped taking my calls. Reports were presented with my name missing from them. Even the board meetings, where I had once been a respected voice, started to feel cold and calculated. I confronted my business partner, David, about it. He was the co-founder, someone I had trusted since day one. "It's nothing, man," he said with a smile, patting me on the back. "Just restructuring some workflows, making things smoother. You're still the heart of this place." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something in the way he avoided eye contact, the way his voice wavered slightly, it told me everything I needed to know. I started digging deeper. Late at night, I went through company documents, searching for any inconsistencies. What I found made my stomach churn. Over the past year, legal contracts had been quietly rewritten, ownership percentages subtly adjusted. My shares were being diluted. A process had been set in motion, one that would soon leave me with little to no control over the company I had built from the ground up. The final blow came in an email marked confidential that I wasn't supposed to see. An internal discussion between the board members outlining a plan to gradually phase out my involvement, citing concerns about leadership alignment. I sat there, staring at the screen, gripping the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. They were getting rid of me. Not because I was failing, not because I had made mistakes, but because I had built something so valuable that they no longer wanted to share it. I took a deep breath. My world was shifting beneath me, but I refused to panic. If they thought they could erase me, they had made one critical mistake. I was the one who built their system, and I was about to remind them of that in the worst way possible. I had built this company from nothing, and now they were pushing me out. But the betrayal wasn't just a sudden coup. It had been in the works for months, if not years. And I had been too blind, too trusting to see it. The board had called an emergency meeting. I wasn't even supposed to know about it, but a slip from an assistant had tipped me off. When I walked into that boardroom, I immediately felt the shift in power. Eyes avoided mine. David, my so-called business partner, sat at the head of the table, my seat, flipping through a stack of documents as if he had already won. "Ah, you're here," he said, barely looking up. "Let's get started." I took my usual chair, but it no longer felt like mine. The others in the room, executives I had once trusted, glanced at each other before someone cleared their throat. "We've been reviewing the company's leadership structure," one of the board members began, her voice measured but devoid of warmth. "Given the recent shifts in our industry, we believe new leadership would better position us for long-term success." My stomach clenched, but I forced myself to stay calm. "New leadership? Are you saying you're pushing me out?" David sighed, putting on his best fake sympathetic expression. "It's not about pushing anyone out. It's about positioning the company for the future. Look, we all respect what you've done here, but your methods are outdated. Investors are looking for fresh direction." "Outdated?" I scoffed. "I designed the very system this company runs on. I secured the biggest deals we've ever had. And now, suddenly, I'm a liability." "It's not personal," David continued, feigning disappointment. "It's just business." The phrase hit harder than I expected. Not personal. After everything I had sacrificed for this company, for these people, they were treating me like an expired contract, something to be discarded when no longer convenient. A man I once considered a mentor slid a thick envelope across the table. "Your exit package," he said. "It's generous, given the circumstances. We hope there won't be any need for unpleasantness." I didn't pick it up. I didn't even look at it. I simply leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle over me. "So that's it. You think you can erase me, and I'll just disappear quietly. David gave me a smirk, his confidence now showing. We've ensured a smooth transition. The company is in good hands. I exhaled slowly, nodding. You really think this company can run without me? Of course, he said, like it was obvious. We have the infrastructure, the team, everything in place. Your departure won't even be noticed. I let a small smile slip. They actually believe that. I stood up, adjusting my suit. All right, if that's how you want to play it. David extended his hand, as if he expected me to shake it. I ignored him and walked toward the door. Before I left, I turned back. You should really make sure you understand every aspect of a system before you try to take ownership of it. Otherwise, unexpected things tend to happen. I didn't wait for a reply. As I stepped out into the hallway, my heart was pounding, but not from anger or sadness. No, this wasn't over. Not even close. They thought they had won, but they had no idea what was coming. I left the boardroom knowing one thing. If they wanted me gone, I wouldn't just walk away. I would take my time, plan every step, and when the moment was right, they would realize their mistake too late to fix it. I spent the first few days after my removal studying every document I had access to. They had stripped me of my title and shares, but they had overlooked one critical fact. I had built the system. Every process, every line of code, every connection in the company's infrastructure had my fingerprints on it. David and the board thought they could simply plug in someone new and move on, but they didn't understand what I had designed. I did, and I knew exactly how to dismantle it, piece by piece. The first step was ensuring I had control over my own future. I reached out to my most trusted contacts, partners, investors, and a few key employees who had always been loyal to me. Some were hesitant at first, wary of getting caught in the crossfire, but others knew the truth. They saw what David and the board had done and were eager to help me set things right. Next, I started gathering information. Since I still had access to certain external networks, I quietly monitored the company's internal communications. It didn't take long to confirm what I suspected. They were already facing problems without me. Bugs in the system, deals falling apart, and clients questioning the company's stability. That was my opening. I began planting doubt where it would hurt the most, among the investors. Using anonymous tips and strategic leaks, I exposed just enough of the internal struggles to make them nervous. I didn't need to do much. David's arrogance was already pushing the company toward a dangerous ledge. I just helped speed up the fall. But my real weapon? The system itself. I had designed the core infrastructure of the company, and while they thought they had full control, they didn't realize that some of the most critical components still ran on proprietary algorithms only I fully understood. Sure, they had engineers, but none of them had been there when I built it. None of them knew how the deepest layers of the system worked. I watched as their problems grew. Their engineers scrambled to fix mysterious glitches that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Systems lagged at crucial moments. Small errors began stacking up, costing the company thousands, then millions. David must have been panicking behind closed doors, but in public, he put on his usual overconfident smirk, assuring everyone that the company was fine, that they were stronger than ever. I let him believe it for a little while longer. Then, I made my next move. Using a proxy, I submitted an anonymous bid to acquire a struggling competitor, a smaller firm that had been overshadowed by my former company but still had valuable assets. I knew this move would set off alarm bells at the board. If I was building something new, they couldn't ignore me. Sure enough, within days, David went on the defensive. He called an emergency press conference, trying to reassure investors that I was irrelevant, that the company was better without outdated leadership. That was exactly what I wanted him to do, because while he was focused on me, he failed to see the bigger disaster brewing within his own walls. The system errors were no longer minor. They were catastrophic. Clients were losing faith, projects were delayed, and deadlines were slipping through their fingers like sand. The cracks had widened into full-blown fractures. And that's when I struck my final blow. I reached out, officially this time. I offered my help. I made it look like a simple business move, an act of goodwill. But in reality, it was the last test. If David accepted, it meant he had no other option. If he refused, the company would crumble even faster. I waited. And sure enough, it didn't take long for the call to come in. David's voice, for the first time in years, lacked confidence. "We need to talk." I smiled. David had always been arrogant, but now, for the first time, I could hear the desperation in his voice. The company was unraveling, and he knew it. What he didn't know was that I had orchestrated every moment of this downfall. I agreed to meet him in the company's headquarters, the very building where they had betrayed me. The moment I walked through the doors, I could see the damage. Employees were rushing around, speaking in hushed tones, their eyes filled with panic. The confidence, the certainty that they could replace me, was gone. David was waiting for me in the boardroom, the same place they had stripped me of my title. But now, the energy was different. He wasn't sitting at the head of the table. He was pacing, running a hand through his hair, his usual smug expression replaced with frustration. "We need to fix this," he said the moment I stepped inside. "You made your point, okay? Now let's be reasonable." I took my time, walking around the room, letting the silence stretch between us. "You think this is about making a point?" He exhaled sharply. "I don't care what it's about. The system is failing. We need you to stabilize it." I chuckled. "Oh, so now you need me? What happened to your departure won't even be noticed?" His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice measured. "Look, I know you're upset, but—" I held up a hand. "Don't patronize me, David. You're not in a position to negotiate." Silence. He knew I was right. The board was in chaos, the investors were pulling out, and the market was reacting violently to every failure. Their last quarterly report had been a disaster, and stocks had plummeted. But what truly sealed their fate was the fact that their system, my system, was collapsing from the inside out. I had made sure of that. "So what do you want?" he asked, forcing himself to remain composed. "You want money? A position back on the board?" I smiled, shaking my head. "I don't want a position, David. I want the company." His eyes widened, and for a brief moment, I saw genuine fear. "That's not possible." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. "Oh, but it is. See, while you've been busy watching this company sink, I've been making moves. Remember that competitor I acquired? Their valuation has tripled in the last 6 months. Their infrastructure is stronger than yours. Investors are already shifting toward me." His face paled. "That's why you've been so quiet. You were building something else." "I didn't have to," I said smoothly. "You destroyed this place on your own. I just helped accelerate the process." The door opened, and several members of the board stepped in. Their expressions were grim, tired. They had been fighting a losing battle, and they knew it. One of them, a woman who had once voted to remove me, sat down and sighed. "We've reviewed our options," she said, "and we're willing to discuss a full transfer of control." David's head snapped toward her. "You can't be serious. Do you have another choice?" I asked, tilting my head. "Because from where I stand, you're out of time. The stock is in free fall, clients are leaving, and in a matter of weeks, this company will be unsalvageable. I'm offering you a way out. Take it." David slammed his fist on the table. "This is my company." I gave him a long, measured look. "No, David. It was our company. And then you decided to stab me in the back. Now it's mine." The room fell into silence. I let the weight of my words settle before pushing the final document across the table. "Sign it over. You walk away with whatever dignity you have left. Or you can hold on, watch this place burn to the ground, and leave with nothing." David clenched his fists, his breathing heavy. But he wasn't stupid. He knew there was no way out. He reached for the pen, his fingers trembling, and signed. The moment the ink dried, I leaned back, feeling a satisfaction unlike anything I had ever known. They had tried to erase me, but now they were the ones being erased. The ink had barely dried on the contract, but for David, it might as well have been a death sentence. The company that he had stolen from me was no longer his to command. The moment he signed, he ceased to be relevant. The fallout was immediate. News of the ownership transfer spread like wildfire through the business world. Investors who had already been wary saw the writing on the wall and bailed en masse. The company's stock, already in free fall, plunged further, wiping out what little stability remained. The empire David thought he could control was collapsing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. David tried to salvage what was left. In a last-ditch effort, he reached out to contacts, trying to rally support from whatever loyalists he had remaining. But loyalty is a fragile thing in the corporate world. When the tide turns, people jump ship fast. One by one, his allies abandoned him. I made sure of that. As for the board members who had betrayed me, they were suddenly faced with a new reality. They were expendable. Some attempted to save face, offering apologies and weak justifications for why they had sided with David in the first place. I listened to their excuses, their desperate pleas to remain in power, but I had no use for them anymore. Clean house, I instructed my legal team. Every single one of them goes. And just like that, they were out. The media had a field day with the disaster. Articles titled, "The Rise and Fall of a Tech Giant," and how arrogance led to the biggest business collapse of the year, painted a clear picture. David had gambled and lost everything. The same reporters who once praised him as a visionary now picked apart every mistake he had made. He went from being an industry leader to a cautionary tale. He tried to reach out to me one last time. A pitiful email, filled with empty words about how none of this was personal, that he had simply done what he thought was necessary for the company. He even had the audacity to suggest that we work together again in some capacity. I never responded. Instead, I moved forward. With David and the old leadership gone, I took full control. I restructured the company, bringing in new blood, people I could trust, people who had seen firsthand what happens when greed takes precedence over vision. The transition wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The company that had once been my greatest source of pain became my triumph. And David? He faded into obscurity, a man who had once stood at the top only to be swallowed by his own ambition. I had won, not just by reclaiming what was mine, but by proving that no one erases me. The battle was over, and I had won. But victory didn't feel the way I thought it would. Standing in my office, overlooking the city, I felt something deeper than satisfaction, clarity. The company was mine again, stronger than ever, yet the revenge I had planned so carefully was no longer my focus. David had fallen, but I had risen, and that was what truly mattered. I spent the following months rebuilding, not just the company, but my vision for it. I didn't just want to erase the corruption of the past. I wanted to create something even greater, something untouchable. I surrounded myself with people who valued innovation over politics, loyalty over greed. I made sure that no one could ever do to me what David and the board had tried. One afternoon, while reviewing reports, an email notification appeared on my screen. From David Carter. Subject: One last conversation. I stared at it for a long moment before clicking it open. I guess I should congratulate you. You played the long game, and you won. I lost everything. Investors, reputation, the future I thought I had. Maybe I deserve it. Maybe I was blinded by ambition. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you understand that none of this was personal. If you ever want to talk, you know where to find me. I closed the email. There was nothing left to say. David had made his choices. Now, he had to live with them. I stepped out onto my balcony, breathing in the crisp evening air. The city stretched before me, alive with opportunity. I had spent years fighting to reclaim what was mine, but the truth was, I was never defined by the company. My power had always been in me. I wasn't just the man who had taken back his empire. I was the man who had rebuilt himself from the ashes. And as I stood there, feeling the weight of my past finally lift from my shoulders, I realized something. Revenge hadn't been my greatest victory. Moving forward was.